This is neuroanatomy number 6 in the series of 10 for the neuroanatomy lecture series. This is on the autonomic nervous system, advanced A&P applied anatomy for the medical professional. The topics we're going to cover are the somatosensory, the voluntary nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, which is involuntary, and go through the pathways and responses. To go through it, you're going to review very quickly the 3 parts of the brain. I call it my 3 brains: the cerebral cortex, the mammalian brain, or the middle part of your brain, and then, of course, the reptilian brain, or the part of the brain we call the brainstem. So which of those 3 brains uses voluntary actions? The cerebral cortex, mammalian brain, and brainstem, cerebral cortex and mammalian brain, or only the cerebral cortex? Which of those use just voluntary actions? And the answer is only the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is what we call the somatosensory. So it senses what's going on if you're touched by an insect, for instance, and it makes those voluntary decisions what to do about it. The mammalian brain and the brainstem are involuntary responses to the what's going on to your body. So, for instance, the somatosensory is first what you feel, and then second, what is consciously done about it. So this is an example of a mosquito, and then you're feeling it, and then what you consciously do about it. And that's all done in the cerebral cortex. First of all, you feel through sensory nerve endings, for instance, in your skin, and the peripheral touch receptors get activated, and they take it up to the cerebral cortex in an area of the brain called the post-central gyrus. That's the central gyrus separates the frontal and parietal lobes of the brain, and the post-central gyrus is that strip of brain, and that's where you feel the sensations. The second thing that happens is that you make a conscious decision what to do about it. So you're feeling it in your post-central gyrus, and then you give orders that go to your pre-central gyrus to activate motor activity and a motor response. The somatic is conscious, and it's taking information towards the central nervous system. So anything that goes towards the central nervous system is called an afferent. To remember, afferent, advancing toward, both starting the letter A, afferent and advance toward. Efferents, as in exit, are what you're doing about it. So they're impulses that are moving away from the central nervous system. So now let's go to the involuntary part of your brain. We're going to start with the mammalian part, where the example here I give is that you take a bite of cookie, and you the food drops into your stomach, and the involuntary fibers of the vagus nerve innervate the stomach, and it picks up that there is food in the stomach, and it initiates a response of gastric acid production. So the efferent fibers are taking impulses toward the stomach, towards producing hydrochloric acid. And of course, the afferent are taking information towards the central nervous system. So the visceral are generally these organs, So I give an example of the stomach as one of the visceral organs in the body, taking the sensations to the middle part of your brain. I'm calling it the mammalian part of your brain, signaling gastric acid production, and the stomach starts producing hydrochloric acid. So this is image showing it, putting it all together. Afferents are what you feel, either consciously or unconsciously, and efferents are what you do about it, either consciously or unconsciously. So the visceral are part of the ANS, short for the autonomic nervous system. So this part of the nervous system, the visceral or autonomic nervous system, breaks up into two pathways. It splits into a sympathetic and a parasympathetic. The sympathetic is the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, people refer to it as the rest and digest arm. So the autonomic nervous system has these two separate divisions. They act differently, but they're acting on the same organs. The sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight, revs things up, prepares to protect the body from outside threats. And the parasympathetic nervous system has a more of a calming effect. Everything slows down, resting, digesting, growing happen during parasympathetic nervous system activation. So these are two separate divisions. They're acting on the same organs, they're acting them differently, but basically what we want is a balance between the two. So we don't want to always be in fight or flight mode. Otherwise, we're not in that rest and digest and growing mode. So the sympathetic nervous system, let me go through that just a little bit more in detail. The fight or flight. These motor neurons that are coming out from the central nervous system are exiting from the thoracic and the lumbar regions of the spinal cord. And they're very short segments, because as soon as they exit those segments that's shown in the red circle, they synapse with other neurons in the sympathetic ganglion chain here near the spine. And then that spine, that ganglionic chain, allows everything to be affected all at once. For instance, your pupils are going to dilate, your heart's going to start racing, blood's going to be shunted away from your stomach, from the digestive system, and sent to places where you're going to need it most. For instance, specifically your muscles, either in order to fight or run away. The parasympathetic nervous system, in contrast, is just preparing that rest and digest mode. The places where the efferents exit the central nervous system are the cranial nerves, specifically the cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. And they're affecting these organs differently. And they're also coming out of the sacral plexus as well. Parasympathetic means on either side. So the parasympathetic nervous system is coming out of those cranial nerves up above. Up here, the cranial nerves, the sacral plexus. the parasympathetic, and this big long chain, that's the vagus nerve. That's called the wandering nerve, cranial nerve 10. That's affecting multiple different organs. But then up here on the other, looking on this side of the example here, the sympathetic nervous system coming out of thoracic, the lumbar areas, and they're being stimulating everything all at once. So we're showing you the sympathetic chain. Let's go on to explain what a ganglion is. Basically, the synapse is that transfer information from one neuron to another. And if you take a bunch of those synapses, put them together, it's called a ganglion, or a group of synapses. Now, just for future information, ganglion can also mean a grouping of cell bodies. It can also mean a cyst, like you'll see in the wrist. So ganglion is really a general term. In this situation, the sympathetic chain ganglion represent synapses, multiple synapses of nerves. The ganglion, or the synapses, are happening very close to the spinal cord. In the sympathetic nervous system, they're happening here at the thoracic and the lumbar areas, versus at the parasympathetic, they're happening close to the organs, or effector organs. And this example is showing it close to the stomach. Next question. So you're doing fall yard work. You've just uncovered a wasp nest. Which arm of your autonomic nervous system prepares you to run? Is it your parasympathetic or your sympathetic nervous system? And the answer is the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, remember, all the ganglia are coming out near the spinal cord. So it allows everything to respond at once. There's no delay. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, pupils dilate, bronchioles dilate. You're ready to fight or run. And this is what it looks like if you, just more of a three-dimensional view of the thoracic spine, for instance. This is an anterior view looking at the vertebra. And then here is the spinal cord. And coming along this segment are the sympathetic chain on the left side and also on the right side. So this is as if this person were facing you. Spinal cord, vertebra. And we'll get into what these other nerves are. This is actually an efferent, somatic efferent. So maybe going to your muscles here. And this is a sensory neuron coming towards, or as an afferent, sensory neurons. Next case scenario, you hear a swarm of wasps. You see them coming towards you. So here's cranial nerve 2. You remember you have 2 eyes, your cranial nerve 2. Cranial nerve 8 is your auditory, you're hearing them. And then your hippocampus, where you remember, at least short-term memory, the hippocampus. So what's happening here is you're getting the afferents, the vision input, you're seeing them, and you're also hearing them. It's going into your mammalian brain. It goes where it's first, right in the middle of your brain. And then those efferents come out in a couple different ways. You make a decision to react, and so you'll run, and that goes up to the post-central gyrus as you make a decision to run. But also within that same situation, your efferents for your sympathetic chain are being fired off. So it's also increasing your heart, your blood pressure, your respiratory rate. All of that happens without a conscious decision. So seeing the bees is actually a combination of somatic response and a visceral response or an autonomic response. So you're getting both, making a conscious decision, and you're also making an involuntary decision to run or fight. And this is the way the nerves are coming out. On the motor side or on the efferent side, the somatic nerves are that one single nerve. And this is that anterior portion, that anterior nerve. And this is the cross section of the spinal cord. It's one single neuron, and then it synapses all the way down to these muscles. ACH is acetylcholine, and NE is an abbreviation for norepinephrine. So in this autonomic nervous system response, you'll have two neurons, a pre-ganglionic neuron and a post-ganglionic neuron. And the ganglion is here where you're getting the synapse. So again, in include a slide that shows you the specific words. So you have one neuron for the somatic, example muscles. You have two neurons required in the autonomic nervous system, both the sympathetic and parasympathetic arm. And a synapse is needed to connect the two neurons. And then a little note here to remind you again that ganglion or a ganglia can mean a group, a gang, or a mass. So a group of synapses forms an autonomic ganglion. So for the parasympathetics, where are the ganglia located? Are they close to the spinal cord or close to the individual organ? All right. So the great thing about being close to an individual organ means that if you eat something, you're not bothering all the rest of your body system. All you're doing is affecting one single organ to start resting and digesting, digesting specifically. So only one organ needs to be active with parasympathetic stimulation. So only that ganglia closest to that necessary visceral organ. So you've got a summary of afferents and efferents. Afferents going toward, advancing towards. Efferents exiting away. Visceral, meaning coming from one of the organs. Somatic, something you sense. So soma means body. So it's something you feel within your body or on your body. And autonomic, happening without your being consciously aware of it. Conscious or somatic. And then the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, the two separate arms for the autonomic nervous system. So again, showing you here, soma, body, things you're consciously aware of. Visceral or organ, parts that you are not generally aware of, unless you've overeaten, for example. And then going to the cerebral cortex, things you're aware of. This is the central sulcus coming down. The precentral is part of the frontal lobe, and the postcentral is part of the parietal. So things you're feeling, things that are coming at you, and what you're doing about it, efferents. So all conscious decisions are made in the cerebral cortex and made in that precentral gyrus, part of the frontal lobe. So the two goals of the autonomic nervous system: first, protect the body, and that's what the sympathetic nervous system does. Is it's the protection against outside threats, and the parasympathetics are your protection or your maintenance of homeostasis and allowing you to grow. And another summary slide just to show you again, efferents going away, exiting away. One single neuron for somatic going to muscles, for example. And then two separate neurons required for the autonomic system. So a ganglia is going to be close to the visceral organs if it's the parasympathetic. It's going to be near the spinal cord if it's part of the sympathetic nervous system. But both systems in the autonomic nervous system are requiring these two separate neurons. And again, protection. Sympathetic is your protection against the outside world, preparing your body to react. Homeostasis, this parasympathetic, it maintains homeostasis within your inside world and allowing you to grow and recover. And that's it. Now, any questions, please include them on my site. And also a PDF for this presentation will be available on the link that I post. Thank you.